Wow, amazing.
As Elandra got out the exit, Sana let out a gasp of admiration. Below them spread the sparkling crystal blue water, and far ahead was a city filled with towers and buildings. Chris recognized the shining white city, the underground city of the Tios, which he has visited in his previous life.
Welcome back, Chris.
Claire turned around with a smile.
I'm home.
Chris replied with a smile.
Is this the underground world where you have been in your previous life?
Sana asked excitedly, looking around here and there.
That's right. It's so beautiful, and it's so bright, also, it's kind of warm. I thought it would be darker, colder, and gloomy. Yeah, indeed.
Chris answered with a smile, feeling a little proud. Then, a large black dragon appeared from the front. The dragon flew in with great force and stopped dead in front of Chris and the others. A fierce dragon with 2 horns on its head, much larger than Elandra. The size of his face alone is as big as the combined heights of Chris and Sana. On top of the dragon stood a tall, slender man with pale skin. His hair is cut to ear length and is silver, and he wears white clothing that shines like silk. Chris recognized the man. It was said that he served as a gatekeeper, tasked with monitoring humans who came to the Tios. As Chris just recalled his memories, the man smiled at him and said, "It is an honor that you remember me."
Huh? Chris, did you ever meet Nigel?
Claire asked in surprise.
No, this is the first time I've met him as Chris. However, when he first came here in his previous life, I had the opportunity to greet him just once.
Oh, I see.
Nigel replied, and Claire nodded in agreement.
But even though you only met that one time, you still remember him well, don't you?
I've heard rumors about him for a long time,
Nigel said, bowing slightly to Chris.
By the way,
Elandra called out.
As you can see, not only Chris but also Sana and Bibi have come with us, so I wonder if Salit and the central office have anything to say about this?
Of course, Salit and the central office are very happy to welcome them both,
Nigel said, turning his gaze to Sana and Bibi. Sana smiled as if relieved to hear that. Then she bowed to Nigel and whispered in Chris' ear.
They already knew we were coming, didn't they?
Nigel smiled back at Sana.
Now, we have prepared a messiona for all of you. A messiona is, in a sense, a place to stay. Please relax there for now. You can also have a meal if you want. Additionally, we have arranged for Jecars, so it would be nice to tour around the Tios as well. We will call you again once you have finished making your adjustments, so please take it easy until then. Then, I will take you to Messiona.
With that, Nigel changed direction and led the way into the town.
By the way, Nigel just said that he would be calling us after the adjustments are complete, but what does that mean?
Chris asked Elandra, who flew leisurely following after Nigel.
That means once your energy bodies have been adjusted, the vibration rate of this world is different from that of the Earth, so even if you feel like there are no physical problems, the energy bodies surrounding your physical bodies are undergoing adjustment to match the vibration rate here. What's an energy body? Is it something like an aura?
Sana jumped in and asked Elandra.
Yes, an energy body can also be described as an aura,
Elandra replied, still facing forward.
There are several layers of energy bodies surrounding people, but the one that humans can sense is called the aura. But there are many that the physical body cannot sense. Including these, all the energy bodies that make up a person can be said to be that person's body. In other words, when we say body, it doesn't just mean the physical body that can be seen with the naked eye. I see.
Not quite understanding, Chris nodded vaguely, and Sana continued to ask questions.
So, what should we do to adjust that energy body to match our vibrations? You don't have to do anything, the adjustment will be done unconsciously. If you feel sleepy, just sleep, and if you feel like eating, just do it. If you do what your body wants to do, the adjustment will be done smoothly. Well then, if we go sightseeing now, will it still be made? Yes, of course, if that's what you want to do.
In the center of the city, there was a gigantic building, towering like a mountain. Around it, large, shining white buildings stand in profusion. Crystal roads stretched in every direction, connecting each building, and many vehicles were traveling on them. In the skies above the city, many fly on dragons and pterosaurs. Upon seeing these scenes, Sana repeatedly exclaimed in admiration, "Amazing."
What's that vehicle on the road? It's floating in the air, right?
Sana pointed at a small white boat-like vehicle moving at high speed down the road.
That's called Jecar. I think it's powered by the life energy of dragons.
Chris explained, relying on his memories from his past life. The Jecar was moving at high speed and was quiet without making any noise. Following Nigel, the group landed in a large square in the center of the city. The square was paved with marble and surrounded by water. Bridges stretched out from the square in all four directions, one of which spanned the huge building towering ahead. The building was so tall that the top was obscured when viewed from below. The mountain-like structure was made of pure white stone, and at the top of the stairs past the bridge, there was a large gate.
It's so big, isn't it?
As Chris stepped down from Elandra and looked up at the building, Sana spoke directly into his mind.
Yeah, that might be the central office.
Chris turned around and responded. And then Clare came over and said, yes.
It's called Urkatheos. Not only the central office, but the main institutions of the Teos are in this building. Have you never been to the central office, Chris? Yeah, this is my first time here.
When Chris turned around, Ramal and Elandra had already transformed into their human forms. Elandra, dressed in a sparkling clothes, was tall and slender. Her long hair reached down to her chest, and her sharply defined eyes, as if carved with a chisel, were the same golden color as before she transformed. In contrast, Ramal's height was almost the same as Chris's. His eyes were a deep blue, like miniature globes, and his curly hair was also the same blue as the clear sky of the Teos. Chris, noticing Sana frozen in surprise at the sight of the two who had shape-shifted into human forms, reintroduced Elandra and Ramal. Sana then bowed her head with her mouth open.
Now, I will guide you to Messiona,
said Nigel, after bowing slightly. The enormous dragon that Nigel had been riding had disappeared without anyone noticing. Nigel waved his crystal rod in the direction of Urkatheos, and 4 Jecars came flying towards them. Jecars crossed the bridge at breakneck speed and came to a sudden stop right in front of Chris and the others. There was no one inside.
Please, get on board.
Nigel gestured toward Jecar with a smile. Jecar was a 2-seater. Clare and Ramal immediately got into one Jecar, while Elandra got into the other one by herself.
Please, get on.
Nigel pointed to Jecar again, directing Chris, who was hesitating. However, Chris had never been on a Jecar before and didn't know how to operate it. As if sensing Chris's anxiety, Nigel said, "Don't worry, it's on autopilot." Chris nodded back and walked closer to Jecar. When he stands directly next to Jecar, a part of the side opens automatically. The door didn't just open, but rather a part of the side of the door was cut out in a U-shape and opened up on its own. From there, Chris and Sana boarded the Jecar. Inside there are just 2 seats side by side, and no steering wheel. Chris sat in the back seat, holding the shoulder bag containing Bibi on his lap. The seat was soft and sunk gently. The seat, which seemed hard at first glance, was actually as soft as a cushy sofa once he sat down. The floor is spacious enough to stretch out his legs. As soon as the two of them sat down in the seats, the sides automatically closed. At the same time, Jecar rose up from the ground. "Oh, it's floating," Sana said. It seemed that the seat height adjusted automatically to match one's height, so Chris and Sana, who were 133 centimeters tall, as well as Nigel, who was over 180 centimeters, all had only their heads poking out from the seat.
"Well then, let's go,"
Nigel called out, and Jecar moved off without a sound. Jecar accelerated smoothly, as if gliding on ice. As the speed gradually increased, Chris felt like his body was being pinned to the seat. It felt like he was on a roller coaster with the safety bar lowered. However, he was not unable to move and was able to move his body freely. As they left the square, Jecar proceeded up a road that ascended as if entering a highway. Ahead, there was a crystal tunnel that was round like a cylinder. The tunnel stretches in a loop around Urkatheos. Upon entering the tunnel, Jecar accelerated even further. However, even as it increased speed, Jecar maintained a consistent distance from Nigel, who was leading. As they zoomed through the tunnel walls at breakneck speed, Sana said, "It feels like we're on a bobsled or something."
But even at this speed, there's no wind resistance at all.
Sana raised her hands, trying to feel the wind.
Yeah, it's true.
Chris raised his hands above his head, wondering if there was some invisible barrier. But there was nothing to touch. "I want to see the view outside too," said Bibi, crawling out of the shoulder bag.
Be careful not to fall, don't lean out too much.
Chris warned, holding Bibi in his arms as he emerged from the bag. "Wow, it's really so fast." Chris's advice didn't seem to be heard, and Bibi struggled to get out of his arms and looked out the window at the scenery outside. Jecar charged forward, weaving through towering skyscrapers in all directions, both vertically and horizontally. After driving for a while, Jecar finally exited the tunnel and turned off the road and headed downwards. Its speed also slowed down. The area was lined with relatively low buildings, and there were many people walking along the streets. Among them were winged people like Clare, and they were of various races. When they came across a lake, Jecar continued along the lakeside road for a while. Along the street, there were a number of small, flat white buildings standing here and there. It was a building similar to a yurt used by Mongolian nomads, but there were no windows or doors in sight. The roof was rounded and domed. Jecar arrived at one of the buildings. The 4 Jekars lined up in front of the building and began to slowly descend. However, Jecar did not land on the ground and continued to fall downwards.